Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's just call out the director, Alphonse Majorana. We have the tradition of presenting the Golden Thumb. It's been duly presented.
Thank you so much. It almost doesn't seem incredible, real, but I guess it is.
It actually is. It's made from the casting of my husband's hand, actually.
My name is on it. That's
yeah. Great. And your name's on it and everything.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I have to tell you, the person that I'm calling out to give this thumb to, the first time I saw this movie, I was completely unprepared for the notes that came out of her mouth. And I was sitting in a movie theater, and it was a screening in Los Angeles, and I heard her and Eulalie hit these notes, and tears just zoomed right out of my eyes. It was so beautiful. Will you please help me welcome Pura Fe? I am so happy to present a Golden Thumb to you as well.
Thank you.
So we're going to do a Q&A with Alfonso and with Pura Fe, and we're also inviting out Rita Colburn-Wack, as you know, who did the Maya Angelou movie. She just won a Peabody Award for it. And George Lepeau, the concert pianist and the president and founder of the International Beethoven Project. And afterwards, wait after the Q&A, because Pura Fe is going to take the stage and play for us. Does everyone have a microphone?
Wonderful. I just want to say congratulations once again. This film was something that when I judged it for Lunenburg, and I didn't know what to expect. And as you peeled back layer after layer of information that I had no idea of, it really struck me as what we do with documentaries. We unveil a culture that hadn't before been fully understood, and even though we may not fully understand, when you take one aspect like music and unveil the culture, you see more of yourself, and so that was fantastic for me. So I want to say thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
I'd really like to know where the idea came from to take this culture and talk about it from a perspective of music. Where did this come from,
Well,
Alphonse?
it initially started with a gentleman called Brian Wright McLeod, who wrote this book called The Encyclopedia of Native Music. And he was interviewing Stevie Salas, that you see, who's one of our executive producers. And actually, Stevie was the one who sort of like realized, he didn't realize how many Native Americans had contributed to music. And so he was pretty, surprised and intrigued by the whole thing. And Tim Johnson, our other executive producer, who's from the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, he was a curator and director of the Smithsonian exhibit in Washington, D.C., called Up Where We Belong, which was basically celebrating Native culture and also popular music. So it really started with them, and they saw a film that Resolution Pictures had produced called Real Injun. I'm not sure if anyone has ever seen it before, but basically it's about the sort of image of Native Americans in Hollywood films. And there was a sort of a lucky meeting at Hot Docs in Ontario about 6-7 years ago, and one of the producers, after meeting with them, they had gone to see this film, Real Injun, and met with the producers. Catherine Bainbridge is also the co-director and one of the producers, and Christina Fawn as well as a producer. They sort of spoke, and originally it seemed like it was going to be something a little more for the Smithsonian, sort of like a 30-minute document or something. But one of the producers called me, knowing that I was a musician as well, and I'm just a fan of music, obsessed with all kinds of diverse music, including traditional music. And they sort of gave me a call and said, what do you think about, did you know Jimi Hendrix heritage and Link Wray? And I said, yes, and then they basically thought, what do you think of doing this little documentary, like 30 minutes or something? And I was like, well, I think it should be a feature. I think there's, I just remember thinking like all these images of all these amazing Native American singers that have this indigenous background that people don't know about. And I thought it would be necessary, and the timing of it all, it was important to sort of, uncover and basically say and do something, the untold story of music. And the first chapter of music, I think, which is the indigenous contribution to music. I mean, they're the first people of this nation, and I think finally their voice, it's not about Catherine and I making the film and using our POV, this is like an oral project. This is something that has to come from storytelling, and it has to come from indigenous people first. So that's how it kind of all came about.
Is there anything that, since you knew already a lot about the subject, is there anything that you learned that was surprising to you?
Yeah, well, I didn't think that, mouths would be closed. I was shocked and surprised going to the South that, no one can speak about their indigenous roots. And, being from Canada and having a relationship with indigenous people since I was a kid, basically, I didn't think that going across America that people wouldn't want to talk about it, or didn't feel like it was important to talk about. I mean, I got this from being at festivals, at the Sundance Film Festival, during screenings, where people would just get up randomly during the Q&A in tears and announce to us, I haven't said this to anyone, but, my grandmother was Cherokee or Chickasaw, This is either African American or white from North Carolina. So I didn't realize to what extent. I think for me, meeting Pura Fe and getting, the information from her and the story and the history, which I felt was, so important to have to make the film. But once you're there, and then you realize, that people don't want to talk about it, or it's not part of their makeup, right? Outwardly, in a sense that they all have this indigenous background, but they've always been told not to speak about it. But once we got to Mississippi and New Orleans, I think this might be the turning point of the film. Like, I had a sense that I learned something, which was ignorance, and I needed it to be put out there. And Catherine and I were obsessed by wanting people to tell their story.
And
Pura Fe, how did you get involved, and how did you feel about having the story unveiled around music?
It's a story I've been telling a long time, and I don't know if anyone knows my music. I have songs called Red, Black on Blues, and I've been writing about this for a long time, so I was really happy and blown away when Catherine called me, and I wasn't quite understanding who she was or what they wanted. It took me a while, and then finally I understood. And I said, you got to get this person, you got to get that person, you got to get. It was amazing to me when I'm so happy. That's all I can say. It's almost like I have armor on now, you know. It's it's a great story, and there's more. There's so much more that they couldn't get in there. I mean, they didn't even get into the whole Appalachian Mountains. You
Hank
know?
Williams and all that.
Yeah, and you see, what's his name? You know, the country, the big star, Johnny. Oh my gosh! So you see Johnny Cash standing up there talking. I mean, Johnny has a lot of Indian blood, and his roots and his story alone. So hopefully there'll be a Rumble too. You know, so.
I think that when we hear your music on that porch the first time, and when we hear the spiritual aspect of that music, we know that it comes from the land, and we know that it connects us all. And as you unveil the story, it gives us all an opportunity to think about how we're all so connected. And so I hope that this opens us up to look more at your music and look more at the subject.
Have you been surprised by any of the reception, any of the response from people, not simply from people who might have a background in their family of being Native, but people especially who are not, and maybe who don't appreciate that aspect of this country's history?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the indigenous response has been great. I mean, you know, they feel finally, like Pura was saying, they've been talking about about this for the longest time, and it's not just music. You know, we can go deeper into like climate change and all that stuff, which indigenous people have talked about forever. And so, yeah, the response has been quite amazing and humbling as well.
You know, many people may not know this, but African Americans have always really identified, and we thought it was a joke, because so many people would say, I'm part Cherokee. And we go, yeah, right. But the thing that happens is when you see this film, and it's so sobering to hear that Native Americans would pass, as if we were lighter skinned, we would try to pass. But to pass for black or white in order to have better treatment is a real commentary about where we are in this country, and that some of us are still in kind of a post-traumatic shock from what's going on. So as you bring this information out to people, has there been reactions to what people didn't know? The murders about having your music being jailed for not, you know, for sharing your culture. I'm sure, has there been some response that you've heard about that?
Response? Well, I mean, this is something I grew up with, you know.
Okay.
You know, so it's all I can say in terms of response. It's just really good to finally see it on a screen for everyone to hear and see. I mean, I grew up with lots of stories, and you know, I like my grandma and her sisters who were raised up in North Carolina, and they were told, and they are black and Indian, my grandma and her sisters, and they weren't accepted on either side of the fence. So they were on their own little thing, and they were all singers. I have 8 generations of singers through the maternal line, and they were women. And But they were told when they were little, they said, when the white man comes, and she meant the census taker, when the white man comes, don't you tell him that you're Indian. You tell him you're colored. Because, and then they were saying, if you tell them you're Indian, they're going to drag you back around the house and shoot you in the head. That's what they told these 7 little girls. So this is wonderful. You know, this film it's like a release. There's so much history, so much that's in the ground that, so anyway, I could go on.
The oral nature of the history also is fascinating, and especially since it's been quashed over so many generations. And it's amazing that there are still stories that have been passed on. And I think it's so important because it seems to me this country in general needs to understand its roots and its history. And it has fought itself within itself in so many different ways with so many different cultures. I think probably now in the 21st century, it's time we acknowledge and accept the good and the bad. But this is a particularly wonderful story because it's a good story. And it shows that whether purposefully or by coincidence, we can't escape the fact that we share in this culture and that it's a unique culture and that we can celebrate it and build upon it. And I think maybe as a musician, Pura Fe, you might, I don't know what you're thinking about how you build upon it from now on, is if there are ways to expand this influence in sort of in the open, maybe with collaborations with different kinds of musicians, and where does it go from here?
I don't know, but I can tell you that, you know, meeting with Monk Boudreau, for instance, who I adore, who I've, you know, gone back to his house, to his home, and spent time with him, with his family and kids, how important to them to pass on this history of indigenous culture, being a big chief, a Mardi Gras chief, and all that. So I think it's never going to stop. I think, you know, like Pura says, you know, this message, this indigenous message is always going to be part of oral history, and it's always going to be passed on. And it's nice to see, like, you know, Monk's kids that you only saw a glimpse of, how important it is for them. And I think, you know, that's the voice. And I think I don't think it's, I think this is a positive thing. The film is hopefully something positive that people can see and can admire and can maybe learn something from it, and maybe also give everyone an opportunity to retrace history, the real history of indigenous culture through music. Because I mean, everyone, like I said before, music is sort of, you know, it's the most, I mean, it connects everyone together. So I think it's the perfect medium to sort of transmit all these messages that the film is trying to do.
I'd like to talk a little bit about how you made the film, because this is a combination of archival interviews, and you did a lot of the photography, is that right? It's beautiful, beautiful. When you look at that, and then you had some animation, and you had to pull everything to put that together. Talk a little bit about when you started and how you were able to pull those pieces together.
Well, first of all, the film took us 5 years to make. So there was a lot of, you know, Catherine and I sat down, and there was a lot of research. We had a lot of researchers, including, of course, people like Pura Fe, like the people that we sort of depended on, Stevie Salas, everyone. It was like a family circle of people doing the most they could for us for the research. But we sort of quickly, Catherine and I put together this kind of board, this visualization board that represented, you know, every icon that we wanted to celebrate, and basically the history of each era, and the music, and of course the political situation and the economic situation, and all that was part of our sort of visual board in our office, you know, for like 5 years. And then it was, you know, some of the hardest part, of course, was to sort of get a lot of these great storytellers, the musicians, to be on the film. Because, you know, musicians, you know, it's 365 days a year. They're extremely busy, so it's hard to plan out. You know, I think actually Pura Fe was the first one we interviewed in New York. Oh, yeah. So, and so that was quite an adventure. Like Martin Scorsese, Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop was the last interview we did, and it was November of 2016. The film was basically cut, you know. But I wanted him because he's sort of an idol, whatever. And so I knew he was a big Link Ray fan, and I thought, you know, it was important to have him there. So all these, the interviews were difficult, but you know, we wanted to film all the land and give it its proper representation. And we also, I had got together with this indigenous girl, Meki Ottawa, who worked with me on the animation, because I wanted something childlike, you know, memories to represent it. And at first, you know, there was all these great cinematic stuff, but I thought something a little more, you know, storybook kind of thing would be a little more interesting for me. And so we did this whole thing with Meki. We did all these little memories that we sort of wanted to represent with animation. So it was a lot of elements, you know.
Wonderfully done.
Thank
I
you.
know that we're going to open up for questions, so I don't know if there are people that have mics, but or if you'll just stand up, but I don't know if you have anything else. I think we should open up for questions.
If there were references to Alaska and Hawaii, if I missed it, I wonder if there's a whole other film.
Hold on one moment, just one moment.
We have a question from the balcony in the center. In the balcony.
Okay, I believe the lady now has the mic. Do
Hi
you
there.
have a mic?
Yes. If there were references to the natives of Alaska and Hawaii, I missed that, and I realized how large it is to cover the nation, but it seemed to me there's maybe a whole other film there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the whole Appalachian, Alaska, Hawaii, especially Hawaii because of, you know, slide guitar, the whole guitar, the history of guitar, that was something that was on our board. We had many states that we wanted to cover, and that was all on our board, and unfortunately, it didn't make it, but that's definitely another documentary in itself.
Tex-Mex.
You know, one thing I have to say on that, the first time I watched the film, the first thing that I had to wrap my brain around was how did the drum transfer to the guitar? I mean, I just had to wrap my brain around that, and that the guitar was coming from the banjo, and the banjo was African. Can you say anything about that? Because that, when you hear the music and I hear you do the sounds for the music, I had to link that. I had to process that.
Well, I think Corey Harris he says it really clearly, and he says about Charlie Patton, he goes, well, I can hear it in the singing and I can hear it in the guitar because he plays it like a drum. It was the way Charlie picks, you know, boom, doom, 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 and he plays like that, and actually I kind of do too. I never even thought of that until, and there was something else Taj told me. He said he thought about all the, which I wished it had been in the film. He talks about that wailing guitar, and he says nowhere in Africa do you hear that kind of, and he says, and to him it sounds just like the men sitting around a drum, the voice,
The chanting.
Yeah.
The chanting. There's a direct
I
correlation.
love that connection, that I had to wrap my brain around the drum as a guitar, and it made me think that culture finds a way, that it just finds a way. I think we have a question up here.
Yes, hi. As the sort of unofficial Canadian ambassador to Ebertfest, I want to thank you very much for bringing this film here. I want to thank Nate and Chaz for bringing this film here. In 7 years, I think this is actually the first Canadian film that I've seen here, so more please. My question was, I mean, you had Robbie Robertson and Buffy Sainte-Marie, and I was wondering, you know, further to the question of who else would you like to have in the sequel to Rumble, or in terms of Canadian artists?
Yeah. well, native artists, there was a tribe called Red. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with them. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many. We also, believe it or not, when we were in New Orleans with the Neville Brothers, they were, pushing us to get in contact with Beyonce, and which we tried, but she was pregnant at the time, and so. And we were still like a little film company from Canada, so I'm not sure how the manager presented the whole thing. But there was a lot of people, a lot of artists that you don't see. I mean, Rita Coolidge. There's there's the whole Hank Williams connection. Karen Dalton, the sound of the music that you hear at the end credits. Karen Dalton was from Texas, who also lived in Colorado. So there was a lot of artists that we wanted to approach.
From the floor, Senator. Thank you very much for such a splendid film. I'm wondering if you could speak about the soundtrack, because I really thought it was just remarkable in a couple of ways. One, whatever restoration you had to do for some of these really archival pieces of music, but then also the live recordings, and I'm thinking of the scene in which a number of women are on a front porch of a home singing, and it sounded like it was done in a studio. It's just, the soundtrack was just marvelous.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the performers were great, and so, right? So that makes it really easy for sound. But we had, we have the person who did the soundtrack for us, Benoit Charret, did an amazing soundtrack for an animation film called The Triplets of Belleville. I'm not sure if anyone has seen him. Yeah. He was nominated for an Oscar and won the Oscar in France, actually, which is le César. And si quelqu'un parle français ici, non? Okay. So, so he, we were longtime friends, and he actually, there's all these, as you know, rights to music, which are super expensive. And so sometimes we can only use 7 seconds of one song, and it's still like $20,000 US or something like that. Anyway, it was all that stuff was kind of crazy because, we want more music, and then, lawyers are calling us saying, well, you can only use 5 seconds or 3 seconds, and then there's a whole meeting going on back, behind us, making decisions, how much of that music can we use? So, Benoit Charret, who's just an amazing musician and singer, kind of fills into some of those gaps that you probably don't notice. For Jimi Hendrix, for Link Wray, he does Black Swamp. That's him with the voice. We had this Tanya Richardson, who's an amazing singer from Montreal. So the soundtrack was really important to us, and we had some some little navigation to do to get what we wanted.
That's pretty amazing. I have another question, because we talk a lot in this day and age about cultural appropriation, and there's a fine line between appropriation and cross-pollination. Right. How do you both think about this?
I'm not understanding the question.
Well, in terms of people, for example, we looked at the footage from Woodstock, and everybody's dressing in Indian garb, and there was a time where that was quite acceptable, and today, of course, people are getting criticized for doing anything close to that, or in musical terms, using forms that are not from their backgrounds. So I'm just curious to know if you have, a sense of that.
That Pharrell Williams had a photo of himself with the native hat, I think, that he got.
There was also that.
There was that as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
I don't know how to answer. I mean, things change and evolve, and what is accepted at one time is not now, like you just said. I think the more aware we become of how sacred an item or how important something means or is to a group of people, then we try not to overstep, right? That's the best way I can answer that. I mean, I looked today at that footage of Woodstock and you saw the people wearing those, and it's just hilarious to me, you know? So it's just funny. But today when we see a woman, you know, all hypersexualized and she's wearing a war bonnet, I mean, it's really a slap in the face. So, you know.
I just think that I just think that, you know, the film, you know, if people like the film and see it as a history lesson as well, then maybe things like Big Bear, for instance, in Utah, don't keep going on. Like we were there at Sundance, and you know, this sacred place of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years where people have been trying to, you know, dig for oil around that place. Well, for a certain time, you know, the Obama administration helped in not having this going on. And then you turn around, and now they're blowing up half of the mountain. So, I don't know. It's just, I just think that maybe, you know, music is a way, it's a healing, it's a medicine, and maybe that way people are, you know, come out and march. Not just, I mean, it's great that people like Al Gore and Leo DiCaprio get involved with climate change. It's a good thing. But it'd be nice to see them at the New York March with everyone else from the indigenous community. You know, so I think, and then films like this can go beyond just entertainment. It could be a history lesson for everyone, including, you know, the White House.
I think it is a history lesson for all of us. And are we about to get a lesson and get some singing? I don't know.
Yes,
if we're,
yes. So
just about to have
I would
that.
really, sorry, that was it. Was I interrupting you? Sorry.
No.
I would really like to know if there's people from First Nations in the audience, and if so, can you please come on stage with us? I think there's some students. Am I right? I hope. Are they here? Oh, yes. Great. You can come this way, yeah.
Are there any other questions in the meantime?
Just want to ask them.
We have one more question in the balcony.
Thank you very much for this movie. It was wonderful in a lot of ways. I wanted to ask you about a singer who didn't make it into the movie, and that is Leanda Hardison, who cut a record for Columbia in the early 70s. A very bluesy, very Indian record. She's an Indian from one of the Carolinas. And I'm wondering if you know about her, could you say a few words about how she fits into the history of that you so eloquently showed in your movie?
I kind of missed the name, I'm sorry.
Leanda.
Oh.
Leanda Hardison. She cut a record in the early 70s called Leanda, and she's a bottleneck guitarist, an Indian from I think North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, and Columbia never renewed her contract, never allowed her to cut another record because they wanted to do a certain kind of music and she wanted to do her own music, which was much more Indian than Columbia wanted her to do.
Fortunately, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know who that is. I want to know who that is. That sounds like my story.
She has powerful power.
Well,
She has a
we're
powerful,
almost ready
powerful.
for music. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to.
I'd like to introduce to you Nicole Boyd and Jamie Sing Song.
How are you? I'm going to give you this. I just want to know what you thought of the film.
Oh, great.
Yeah, can you call it?
Yeah, so as they said, my name's Nicole Boyd. I'm the director of the Native American House. I'm from the Blackfoot and Comanche Nations and born and raised in the Chicago Native community.
And I'm Jamie Sinkson, formerly the director of the Native American House, now the director of the Illini Union in Yaqui and Apache.
So. Yeah, I grew up listening to kind of classic rock and 70s music, and so this was a great soundtrack of me growing up, and I appreciate people being able to show a different light into our culture and into our community, and being able to think about it in a historical aspect and how that influences, where we're at today with not only music, but how we tell our stories. As it was kind of pointed out in different aspects of the film, most of our communities, actually all of them, have a strong background and a strong history of storytelling. And this is just a different way that we're able to do that.
We also want to thank you for bringing this as a medicine to this location. There's a lot of struggles that we face. I think about the genealogy of the music and the beat that has been in this land for eons of time. And for many of our cultures, the drum is preceded by prayer and tobacco, that connection to earth. And so much of this film has emanated from a place in a spatial context. And you bringing it here is really special to us, especially in Illinois with over 567 federally recognized tribal nations. There are none in Illinois. Yet we have the 9th largest urban Indian population in Chicago, which continues to be vibrant in its creation of art and retaining a culture. And so it's complicated for us in Illinois. And and also the film festival, there's this wonderful rooting of a groundedness in this location that people coming together and being able to share in this creative way is healing. And I want to thank you for also putting in the No Dapple and the Pipeline Challenge at the end, because that's a continuation of that voice that emanates forward.
Thank you so much.
Once again, let's thank our guest, and we're going to prepare for a performance by Pura Fe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad. I was hoping, because I asked Chaz.
Okay. Almost. Just gonna jump all over the place. Thank you. Beep, beep, beep. I think so. Howdy. Thank you. I'm going to start with a song that's it's a cappella. I like to use a loop station. I stack up all my harmonies. This song is a passenger pigeon dance. It's very old, really old, maybe 1,000, maybe more years old. It's sung now within Iroquois social dance songs. And it traveled up from North Carolina, from the Tutelo people. And before that, probably when we came up the Mississippi, long time ago. So here we go. Thank you. So here's the song that's in the film, Great Grandpa's Banjo. And I wrote it in honor of my grandma's grandfather, who played banjo on the plantation, all the functions. He was a slave. And he played for all the big parties and so forth, him and his brothers. His name was Boyett Lee. And although I never met him, but he's in here. So here I am, Boyett Lee. No, I'm just joking. Okay. Oh, touching away, easy, chang, 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 chang. Touching away, easy, chang, hit, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, 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 we banjo go, na, hey, oh, hey, oh, touching away, easy, chang, 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 chang. Touching away, easy, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, 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 we banjo go, na, hey, oh, hey, oh, touching away, easy, chang, 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 chang. Touching away, easy, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, 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 we banjo go, na, hey, oh, hey, oh, touching away, easy, chang, 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 chang. Touching away, easy, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, 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 we banjo go, na, hey, chang, chang, chang. Touching away, easy, chang, easy, chang, chang, easy, chang, 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 we banjo go, na, hui, 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 hui. So normally I sing with a group of women, and we're called Eula Lee. And thank you. And when they're not with me, I can carry this box and kind of. But anyway, I'll do one more a cappella. And this is also was in the film. And it's an anthem, really, and I made it like a canoe song. It's one of our lost parts of ourselves that we're trying to retrieve. I mean, we're always out on the water, but to bring back the canoe songs and dances and so forth. And so this was part of my contribution to back home, this song. In a lot of the Indian churches back home, in the eastern part of North Carolina, there's a lot of little Native communities. And one of the instruments that's dying out now was to play slide on your lap. And so when you would go into the churches there, it was common that you'd see people singing in harmony and playing usually a dobro or an acoustic guitar that they raise the strings and play lap style. And I was about 15 when I heard Chief Leon Locklear, the Tuscarora Nation. I heard him playing on the back of his trailer at a powwow at night. And I heard that sound and I was like, oh my God, my heart. So I listened to him a lot, but it wasn't until I was in my 40s, maybe 40 years old or so. I was at the Edmonton Folk Festival with Eulalie, and they, you know, in Canada, they put all these artists together on the stage and make them do things together. So we ended up sitting next to a man named Kelly Joe Phelps, who plays a phenomenal slap slide. He doesn't play slide anymore, but he was sitting right next to me, and I just watched him, and I just felt like I had done that before in my life. Anyway, I went home, bought a guitar, raised the strings, and started playing, and took most of my songs and put them down on a slide guitar. But so this is one song that Eulalie sang, and it actually went platinum. And we did it with Robbie Robertson on his Robbie Robertson Red Road Ensemble. He took us all over Europe, and so this is called, it's two songs in one, Roots and Machchi, which means our hearts. And the words say, our hearts are full and our minds are good. And our ancestors come and they give us strength and they tell us to stand tall, to sing and dance and never forget who you are or where you come from. And that's for everybody. Roots run deep, the soul, Mother Earth, protecting people, their sacred birth. Not who's first, but where you belong, where many old spirits dance her song. Piece of paper, a devil's lie. For this you let my people die, to return our land. Earth, the sky, our soul will share her life, give corn seeds to sow. These old traditions have years to grow. You have no spirit, no right, no God. You are the death from graves you rob. Piece of paper, a devil's lie. For this you let my people die, to return our land, our lives to the earth, the sky will pay the price. Through the earth, the sky, our soul will rise.
tâm bùi khăn spêu hebi mặc chi tâm bùi am vi mặc chi tâm bùi khăn spêu hebi mam biwa khô cái nong ta hôn ta đi cái ta iwe me Thank you. Not quite sure if I should. I don't know the guitar part to this one song, but I really like. I'm just going to sing it real soft. And it's called Red, Black on Blues. It goes like this. It's more for the words than anything. It goes, oh, Africa washed up, chains on these shores. Sailed Indians back over ocean to that old ivory door. The trade of these stolen people from these very stolen lands was a stolen tribal trade connection, song and paddle, sand to sand. Ancestral path, wind songs, followed star, sun, and moon. Map across these waters to the red cross of red, black, on blues. Oh, wow, Nolans, Mardi Gras, Indian Delta, fife and drums of a yazoo. Chicago, Texas, Piedmont, Field, Holland, chain gang singing blues. Dixie, jazz, gospel, rock and roll, rhythm, and blue suede shoes. The tears that railroad under had the war clubs of Baton Rouge. Back to the old soul connection, play the way by ancient canoe. The call of Africa singing them ancient blues. Wow, wow, basically, that song is, it's also sang with the melody of Amazing Grace works on top of it. And years ago, when I was up on the Tuscarora Indian Reservation in New York, in Buffalo, there were some singers that were there. And one of them was an elder, and he told me, you know, we talked about the Underground Railroad, how it went through all the Indian territories and crossed over on the Tuscarora Reservation up over the Canadian border. And it was according to a little girl who sat on the porch where the slaves would cross, and whether she was wearing one braid or two braids, they would know if the coast was clear for them to come through. You won't find this in books. These are stories from the people. Anyway, this man had told me that the song, Amazing Grace, that it was passed down, that he said that it was like a song, a traditional African song that was sung on the waters. And he said it probably originally sounded like, way, hey, way, hey, hey, way, hey, way, 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 when he sang that to me, I cried so hard, it felt like I had been there. So I had relatives that crossed the waters, and those stories of the people, you hear even African stories within the native communities, and vice versa. There's so much hidden history that I think needs to be told, and I'm really thankful for this movie because it kind of gives you a little bit of that, and you see so I think I'll stop. Maybe I'll leave you with one more little song. Okay. This is called Grandma Easter's Lullaby. My grandma's name is Easter. She passed years ago, and she sang, and her sister sang. We could count 8 generations of women singers through the female, our maternal line, and my clan is Deer Clan. And so this song is for her, and Grandpa too. His name was Keppel Monk, and he was related to Thelonious Monk. I'm part of that Monk connection back from Newton Grove, North Carolina. There were 4 Monk brothers on the Archibald Monk plantation, and they married 4. They were African, and they married 4 Tuscarora women from the Willis Coles plantation. And right there in that area in Sampson County, that was the last battle in the Civil War, the Bentonville battleground. And my whole family comes from there on my mama's side. That was all Tuscarora country. And so a lot of these songs I write come from that land, come from that ground, and the stories that my family tell me. So, and here's one. This is called Grandma Easter's Lullaby, and she hummed all the time. So, humma. Humma, 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 Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing me here. And I guess that's it. Nyawe Goa.
We just want to say once again, thank you to Pura Fe and Alphonse Marana. And this is such a beautiful way to end the festival. We'll see you all next year.